Let me tell you a little story. When the advertising guru Maurice Saatchi struck out alone to start his new advertising agency called M&C Saatchi, as he walked through the grand marble reception area of the company's new HQ, the firm's accountant was with him. And the accountant said, "Boss, we have no clients yet, and we can't afford these expensive offices." Saatchi leant into the accountant and said, "Sometimes you grow because you have to." For better or for worse, that is going to be the abiding theme of this new government and Liz Truss. It normally takes decades to transform a country. Well, she's got 2 years. She's had a tumultuous start. Moments after arriving at number 10, she had to deal with the passing of our greatest ever and longest-serving monarch. She takes up her job in the context of a war in the East with Vladimir Putin and an economic crisis as the result of, yes, the war, but mainly policies pursued during the pandemic, especially lockdown. The scale and complexity of her in-tray is without limits. And while she campaigned on a ticket of lowering taxes to win the leadership, her emergency budget on Friday, the 23rd of September, backfired spectacularly, sparking an explosion in the cost of government borrowing and a collapse in the value of the pound. Plenty of media commentators and a good few in her own party believe that she's now reached the point of no return. Some speculating she could be out by Christmas. Rubbish. It's far too soon for the public or her party to make their mind up about Liz Truss. In the end, it strikes me that the real crime of that budget statement was that it was honest. Honest that you can deliver public services and frankly expect the way of life that we currently enjoy in a world of artificially low interest rates, unprecedented borrowing and anemic growth. It ain't going to happen. Liz Truss is no public speaker. Oscar Wilde, Winston Churchill or even Boris Johnson, she ain't. But Truss has something that old Boris sorely lacked, a willingness to be unpopular and to do what's right for the country. And we've seen just that from her days after her arrival in the top job. She's willing to be straight with the British people and she's willing to deliver a tough message, one which many don't want to hear, that Britain isn't working. Whether it's Labour or the Conservatives, we limp from one administration to the next with Prime Minister after Prime Minister elected on a have-your-cake-and-eat-it promise, which is in fact a lie. We now have a Prime Minister that's willing to tell us things that we don't want to hear, a precious and rare commodity in a politician. We don't want to hear that public spending is too high, and the more we put into the NHS, the worse it seems to get. We don't want to hear that inequality sadly exists, but that we're reliant on the tax receipts of the wealthiest in this country, 1% of whom contribute 30% of all taxes to the Treasury. We don't want to hear that interest rates at 0.5% are not possible long term in a healthy, normally functioning economy. Liz Truss is many things, and one of them is honest. She even admitted on Breakfast TV today that she could have laid the groundwork for this budget better. Getting a nod from the Office for Budget Responsibility would likely have prevented the crash in the value of the pound. It was politically foolish, economically naive, and a damaging oversight. But the pound has recovered, borrowing costs have dropped, and with the global cost of energy coming down, her mini-budget, which rightly offers protection for businesses and households this winter with their energy bills, is likely going to cost a lot less than anticipated. Plus, inflation has likely peaked, so fears about spiralling interest rates on mortgages next year are wide of the mark. They've spiked, and that's scary. Tell me about it. But there's every chance they'll go the other way when a better inflation outlook becomes clear. In my view, this financial statement, which had to be rushed out quickly, was a failure not of policy, but of communication. And in that, Truss must improve. But the vision is right. And after the polish of Tony Blair and the bravado of Boris Johnson, I'm actually ready for an ordinary public speaker, a no-frills but effective Prime Minister who says it like it is. For decades now, our governments have been asleep at the wheel, managing long-term decline as a result of tax and spend policies which have produced mediocre growth and the highest tax burden on businesses and individuals for 70 years. And the top rate of tax should go. Labour have politicised this outrageously, but the top rate tax cut will cost between £2 billion a year or nothing, or could even bring money in, say some economists, as more people are willing to go up the pay scale without fear of being clobbered by HMRC. And rich foreigners are more likely to come here because of our favourable tax terms. Getting rid of the banker's bonus will allow us to steal the best banking talent from around the world and fill the Treasury coffers. And even if the top-rate tax cut did cost £2 billion a year, that's a cheap advert to encourage enterprise in this country and to fire the engines of the British economy. Don't forget, we wasted £2 billion a month on worthless testing during the pandemic for a virus that was everywhere at that point. No complaints from Labour then. We should be love-bombing the rich, not attacking them, and sending them abroad, which is what happens if you crank up taxes. I want their cash, don't you? It's time for Britain to think big, and that was the nature of this mini-budget, and I believe is the nature of Liz Truss. Throwing caution to the wind, she rushed out that statement, and yes, she could have changed the timings of various announcements, and she could have made her life easier politically by not cutting that top rate. But she's got a pair of balls on her, and she means business. She knows the difference between a popular policy and the right policy. And she has that in common with her political hero and a woman she's emulated many times. Margaret Thatcher, who for her sins and her many mistakes transformed the fortunes of this country from being the sick man of Europe to an economic, political, diplomatic and military powerhouse. Well, Thatcher was wildly unpopular between elections, and her budgets in the early 80s caused outrage not just in the media and from the opposition, but from her own backbenches too. But she had a plan and it paid off. And she didn't hang around in delivering it, and neither is Truss. This week at conference, our new Prime Minister must double down. Post-pandemic and post-Brexit, she has a rare and historic opportunity to change the direction of this country for the better, to make Britain the most attractive, investable country in the world, a magnet for homegrown and global entrepreneurship. The Office for Budget Responsibility will publish their initial response to the mini-budget in just a few days, with a full report in November, by which time the potential cost of energy bailouts will be projected to be a fraction of what it was once feared. This mini-budget will be more effective than first thought, less expensive than first thought, and more of a no-brainer than first thought. If in 2 years' time, when Truss goes to the polls, if she can demonstrate that Britain avoided recession whilst the Eurozone sinks into the red, if she can demonstrate that a brain drain of talent from Paris, Frankfurt and Munich to business-friendly Britain all happened as a result of a simplified and lower tax regime for high achievers, if she can demonstrate the British economy is on a long-term path to robust growth, not tax and spend, then she will win. She will not only reverse that 30-point poll deficit to Labour, she'll be 30 ahead. My message to Liz Truss is a clear one. She's got to stand her ground. Don't buckle, don't bend, and keep being straight with the British people. We haven't had political courage on this scale for decades, and it might just be the making of us. Most people think the mini-budget was a disaster. The vast majority do. Among the public, the political establishment and the market. But that's the madness of crowds, the stampede of the herd in panic. And history judges that it's often the lone voice which is the wisest, and fortune favours the brave. I think this mini-budget will be a surprise hit in time and could pave the way for election glory. It's my view Liz Truss has got this right, but no one knows it yet. Least of all, Sir Keir Starmer, who's ordering red curtains for number 10. Not so fast, I say. U-turn if you want to. Labour's not returning.